They've got, yeah,
Lean, hungry, loving.
yeah.
Oh,
This, he loves it.
I think that was a pretty
That
small.
and trumpet,
They get really small pillows and
very nice.
Not first.
Right.
Yeah, are you speaking for the city of Lexington, or I guess we just presented it later on?
Unless you want.
All right, I will call to order this September 28, 2023 meeting of the Lexington Planning Commission at the Rockbridge County Administrative Offices. And we have in attendance Leslie and oh gosh, is you Mary Stewart and not Sammy, John Eastwood, not your son, and Pat Bradley. Okay. We approval of the agenda. Anybody want to make a motion or make an adjustment to the agenda? No,
You mentioned it's been withdrawn?
no, but
But
we're gonna
go
keep
ahead
it.
and leave it on the agenda.
Oh,
So that
okay,
if
okay.
anybody's interested, I'll make the announcement that it has been withdrawn.
Right, I move to approve the agenda as presented.
Second,
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? None. Okay, approval of the minutes from the September 14th meeting. There's a need for any additions, subtractions, corrections to these, as always, detailed and excellent minutes.
Yeah, good.
Good. Good.
I move to approve the minutes as presented.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? All right, on to number 4. Do we have any citizens' comments on matters not on the agenda? Seeing none, we will close said period of comment and move on to new business. Our first order of new business of the evening is a what are we calling this? A preliminary subdivision 2023-01, which is an application by the city of Lexington proposing a preliminary subdivision plat boundary, subdivision plat boundary line adjustment for 140 Evergreen Place, tax map number 31-1-1, and Evergreen Cemetery, tax map number 25-1-9, owned by the city of Lexington. We'll start with Arnie and the staff report.
The city had the good fortune of being able to purchase the property owned by Dr. Knox, and that is at 140 Evergreen Place. And you'll see on the location map on the bottom of the page or your first page of the staff report, also tax map 31-1-1, with the intent of having most of that property dedicated to an expansion of the Evergreen Cemetery. So what you're being asked to review and make a recommendation on is a boundary line adjustment. What you see there are 2 parcels. We're not creating any parcels. We're shifting the boundary line between those 2 parcels over in such a manner that the parcel that contains the cemetery becomes larger and the parcel that contains the single family residence becomes smaller. And you see that on the next page. It's been shaded green. So that's the portion of the property that we purchased from Dr. Knox that will become part of the cemetery property. And you'll notice a property or a parcel that's left with the single family house. One thing that I didn't do very clearly on here is when we make boundary line adjustments, we have to ensure that the minimum property size, acreage, and also lot width are retained. And that did occur in this case. I just didn't write it out for you. As an example, the house will be on a parcel that is 0.327 acres in size, which is roughly 14,244 square feet, where only an 8,000 square foot minimum lot size in that zoning district is required. Similarly, a 60-foot minimum lot width is required, while approximately 200 feet is provided. So the parcels do meet our minimum lot size and lot area requirements for those zoning districts. Just to maybe point you to the authority to review section on the bottom of page 2. Because of those two sections that are referenced, the planning commission must review all preliminary plats and may recommend approval or denial. If you recommend denial of preliminary, you must state the reason for your recommendation of denial and the specific changes that are necessary for the plat to be recommended. In most cases, we really don't have a true subdivision where we're creating parcels, new parcels. What you will see most of the time is a vacation of a boundary line or a boundary line adjustment like we're dealing with this evening. And then over to the next page, just a little bit more, and then the recommendation goes to council, and the council has so many days to handle that. Otherwise, it's automatically approved, and they specifically have to hold a public hearing, even though we did advertise a public hearing for this evening for this item in front of you. Staff does recommend that the preliminary plat be approved as submitted. And one other thing to mention, when we do anything with subdivisions, it's a preliminary subdivision. So typically it's preliminary. They go out and do the design. We make sure that it actually meets the requirements. And then they later, either after they construct it or before they finish, they at least go in and do a final. And the final is not back through you. It comes administratively to me. So I just match up what the final plat is, make sure that it meets the requirements of the approved preliminary plat, sign off on the copies, and then they take them to the courthouse and have them recorded. That's all I have for presentation. Happy to answer any questions.
Just on a technical thing, I don't think you've ever had a case where there's been a problem there where the preliminary versus the final, it matches up, right? Okay. All right. Does it matter for us or at all whether will there be any new fencing put up?
I'm not so
Would that
sure
be a
that
different process or?
I believe, and I hope I'm not incorrect. The last thing that I heard was the city manager had the intent of getting the cemetery advisory board perhaps involved to maybe provide some background or input on how some of those improvements should be handled. But
For the moment, it doesn't matter that everyone's fine with. The house seems to be lots of trees kind of forming a natural barrier. Okay. And that's somewhat down the road anyway, when they want to start making use, when the city wants to start making use of this. Okay.
there's one other tiny hiccup that'll come back to you all. When we updated the zoning ordinance, we did not make a cemetery permitted use in parks and open space. And our two cemeteries are actually zoned parks and open space. So it's currently a permitted use in R1, which this property is zoned R1, so it's fine. But when we do the next text amendment, we're going to have to make an adjustment in the use matrix so that there is a permitted use, a P or a by right in the category for parks and open space. So it'll be a minor adjustment there.
And what is the cemetery currently?
Parks and open
It's our
space.
parks and open space.
So parks and open
Okay.
space does not currently allow a
Right.
cemetery as a by right use.
Right. So, and there's
An
just this
oversight
here.
when we
Right.
updated the.
Okay.
code.
Okay, any other questions for Arnie? And yeah,
No.
so, yeah.
I want,
Marisol,
I
yeah.
want a little just, as just a curiosity thing, maybe somebody else is also wondering it, and that is where you call it a boundary line adjustment for a subdivision, even though it's not a subdivision. So, or did I get that wrong?
No, you got it right. And it's a good point. I should have explained that in our subdivision ordinance, so chapter 360 of the code of the city of Lexington is our subdivision ordinance. So we have a subdivision application, but some the things that fall underneath that subdivision application are boundary line adjustments and vacation. So true, we're not doing a subdivision, but it falls under the subdivision heading and under the subdivision chapter. So it's more of a catch-all, even though we're doing a boundary line adjustment, we're not subdividing anything.
There's no other place to do it.
Right.
Right.
And Arnie, on the page 1 of 3, or I guess page 8 overall of our thing, where the orange lines are outlining it, there's a little line going through the 140 Evergreen kind of horizontally. What is that? Those aren't two properties there, right? Are they two?
No, those did not show up as that I'm aware of on the full survey. So if we go all the way over the survey that Timmons provided with the application, and I'm now going into page 18. I can't read that. maybe it's 18.
Yeah, page
But
18.
it's not included there, so that could have just been not an error or an issue, but just something left over on our GIS map for some reason.
Right. Yeah, but it's right. There's no other one. Right. Okay. I figured that's what it was. Okay, great. So then no further questions for Arnie. Would we then assume that what you just gave us would count as the applicant statement since it's the city?
Or if I could make the applicant statement, please approve my boundary line adjustment.
Okay, all right, that's a statement. Would the public like to comment on this? Then we will open and close the public comment section, and we will, among ourselves, discuss and decide what think we for quorum people. Would someone like to read out a motion?
Sure, I'll read it out. I move to approve preliminary subdivision application PS 2023-05 for the adjustment of boundary lines between 140 Evergreen Place, tax map number 21-4-12, and Evergreen Cemetery, tax map number 21-4-13, in accordance with the plat showing boundary line adjustment of the lands of the city of Lexington, completed by Timmons Group as submitted by the applicant.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a well-read motion, a second. Barring no further comment, all in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed, carries unanimously. Thank you, applicant, for coming. You're welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting if you would like. We will move on to the second order of new business, which is an entry corridor certificate of appropriateness 2023-04, an application by Kimberly Hostetter for a certificate of appropriateness for new signage for Harmony Home Team by eXp Realty Office at 637A Waddell Street, tax map number 35-1-1, owned by H+C Rental Inc. Staff report.
As you know from your last meeting, you've already handled a number of items for this parcel. And the way we handle these when they come back is to provide a little history section. So we try not to change the rest of the staff report that you've seen before, so you know what's old and what's new. So in the history section on page 23 or page 5 of 5, it does mention that in the previous meeting, you approved 2 wall signs, a window sign, and A-frame sign, and for the Harmony Home eXp Realty Team at 637A Waddell Street. And you deferred a decision on the proposed freestanding sign because if you recall, it looked a little bit more like a for sale sign as opposed to an actual business sign for a business location. And you asked the applicant to come back with some details. And the applicant did provide, and we did not give you the whole application again, but if you flip over to the last page 27 of your staff report, you see the type of sign at the bottom that it would look like. So a typical sign with 2 posts, a little frame around it, and then an inset panel. And on that inset panel would have the very similar color, style, design as you proved previously. And that design is shown on the top part of page 27. And again, that would be down lower, closer to what the entrance off of Waddell Street. So if you turn off of Waddell onto this private property, that drive that goes up the hill, it'll be on the left-hand side. And one thing I should mention, it does meet the zoning requirements in the C2 zoning district. It allows 1 freestanding sign per street frontage. It allows up to a 25 square foot sign. This is only 6 square feet.
Yeah.
And it also allows a sign up to 15 feet in height, and this will be much lower than 15 feet in overall height.
Double sided, will it say that it show the same thing on both sides as far as, okay. Anything else up
That's
front?
it for
Any
me.
questions there for Arnie?
And I assume the building owner is okay with it?
Would the applicant like to make a statement, or? We don't need you to, if there's only if there's anything you want to, else you want to tell us. No, okay. This would be a time for the public to comment. We will open that up. No one running in. We will close that public comment period. So discussion among ourselves, are we good with, the size seems appropriate according to Arnie, on both sides, any details that you can think of that considered?
My one question, and then I don't know, it would have to go, I guess, to the owner of the whole lot would be, I don't believe there are any other signs down there at Waddell Street. And if somebody wanted to put one down there, does that have, of course, it has to be agreed upon again, but, how does something like that
Yeah,
get?
well,
That would have to be
decided.
worked out by the folks, the tenants wanting the sign and the property owner, because only one is allowed.
Ah.
And currently there's one, so there'd have to be an agreement and some sort of
Okay, just,
deal to work that out so that there would be one multi-tenant sign potentially in the future. And we've had that discussion with the previous tenant, the Rockbridge Flooring Company. And if I'm not mistaken, this has been a couple of years ago that they went and talked to the owner. And at that time, there wasn't a desire to put in a multi-tenant sign. So he was able to put his sign down there, and that's now, they've moved. So that's now gone. And there aren't any other signs at the bottom of that hill that I'm aware of.
And that would come back then through us if that was
Correct. Any
because
sign
there'd be a
change.
substantial change, right?
raising that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a good question. And I guess everybody who wants to know that Kenny's is there knows that Kenny's is there and they can see from below there, right?
Yeah.
Any other questions before someone might want to make a motion?
No, it looks good. I like this design better. I think Gladys brought up that the other one looked more like a realty sign and this is clear and it's nice that it points the way to where the office actually is as well. So that I will move that we approve the entrance corridor certificate of appropriateness for the freestanding 2x3 directional sign as proposed by the applicant.
I second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further comment, discussion? No. Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Carries unanimously. Thank you for coming back again. Appreciate it. And of course, welcome to stay. We actually don't have a lot left here for you to enjoy, but thank you for staying and good luck with the business. Good, yeah. So good luck with the business. We'll look forward to seeing those signs up. Moving on to the next bit of new business, the conditional use permit 2023-02 application by Laura Lee Pisha requesting approval of a conditional use permit to allow an educational facility, primary/secondary at 10 North Lewis Street, tax map number 25-4-B and 25-4-C, owned by Laura Lee and Jonathan Pisha. And Arnie will update us on that.
As you recall, this conditional use permit was before you several meetings ago. It was re-advertised as an educational facility and as a daycare center, or re-advertised. And then it was brought forward, so it was postponed so that they could do a little bit more research on some life safety issues. We contacted them in the last week and received a reply, I think on Monday, saying that they were withdrawing their application and they are looking for space that is already zoned commercial.
Okay, and so then does this application die at this point?
It
It's
is.
done. Okay,
It's a withdrawn application.
withdrawn.
We had that in writing and we have that statement in the file, so it will be closed out.
Okay. Do we need to invite public comment? I don't think we have anyone here to public comment. So, okay, so that is that. Then, so that closes out new business. Anyone want to talk about accessory dwelling units? No? Okay. We will move on to other business, and if Arnie has a zoning and planning report, we'll hear it.
Just quickly, we did hold a BZA meeting a couple of Mondays ago. There was an application for short-term residential rental. And I made a determination based on the material that they provided to me that they were not primary residents. They appealed that to the Board of Zoning Appeals. There was a lively discussion at the Board of Zoning Appeals, and they determined that I was incorrect in my determination or decision. And they said that I had not paid perhaps enough attention to the tax filings, and therefore they overrode. And the next day we scheduled an inspection, and they have now been issued a registration for a short-term rental at 207 Diamond Street.
Can you, so were they filing their taxes here? Is that what that means or?
One of the things that we ask for, and for showing that you're a primary resident, there's no magical one document. So we ask for a number of things and sort of look at it on the balance of the whole. And so we ask for tax forms if they've been there long enough. Lots of folks are coming in buying new, so they're not going to have last year's tax form. And they sole proprietorship, and I'm not going to understand all of it, but the way they did their taxes with their 2 or 3 businesses is they lumped them all in together, and it goes to their business address, which wasn't their home address. So they've never had at least a Virginia tax filing that was going to the 207 Diamond Street address. So that was just one of the considerations. So we did not have a tax form submitted with the application because it wasn't coming here. But then they had some of their vehicles registered and their voter registrations. And then both of their jobs are out of town. So on the balance of it, from what was provided to me at that point, I determined that they were not primary residents. And like I said, I was overridden. There was also new information that came out since my determination back in August that I think the BZA put some weight on. And then again, it was a lively discussion, and by a vote of, I think, 3-1, they overrode what my decision was, which is perfectly fine. So the registration was issued.
And is there anything we can do from the ordinance standpoint to make it more clear on how to determine? Because that is a tricky thing, trying to figure out, do you live here 185 days? But is anything we can help for in the future to make it smoother or not really?
That's a good question, because Richmond is recently looking into this and making that a requirement. I think they didn't have that previously for short-term rentals. And I was looking through the ordinance, well, actually looking through the articles and not really into the ordinance to see maybe what they require. But it's always going to be tricky because there isn't that one thing. So don't they, what can you find on Facebook? So you just have to use your resources. But as of right now, I'm not aware of, do we need to ask for one specific thing, or what can we do to amend our requirements to make that easier? But we can certainly take a look at that to see if there is anything.
Okay.
One bit of not so great news, the TAP application with VDOT, which is a transportation alternatives, comes around once every 2 years, alternate years with our smart scale grant. We had put in for Waddell Street. So Waddell is one of our bike ped, actually is our first priority project for the bike ped. So along Waddell from South Main to Wallace is segment 1A, and 1B is from Wallace over to Houston Street, which you'd have to make your way by the bubble pool parking lot and across some private property. Because of the way the grant is set up, and I cannot remember if maximum grants are somewhere around $1 million or 800,000, but we had put in for 2 segments, and then we had a consultant put some costs together for those when we already had preliminary costs in the bike ped application or the bike ped report. And the response that we got, or feedback from VDOT, was that was too much. So what we're going to do is cut back. Instead of have 1A and 1B in our grant application, is now just going to be 1A, which is again the segment along Waddell Street from South Main to Wallace. And maybe in 2 years, if we're lucky and get this grant, maybe in 2 years we go back for the next segment. And then there's a third segment in there too that gets us all the way down to the back of the Don Tequila's shopping center. So just to make you aware that we did put in, received some feedback, and had to cut back our grant application request. We're also working or picking back up with 2 code amendments. One we found out during our plan development, PUD to PDMU in the opportunity zone map along South Main Street. Some of that was encroaching along the included residences along Maple Lane. We need to go clean that map up, so that we'll be working on that. And the other thing is, in the subdivision ordinance, we have found that, and we've had some requests, but we have found that boundary line adjustments and vacation of property lines typically don't go to council in other jurisdictions. We're one of the few. So we're going to propose a amendment to the subdivision ordinance so that boundary line adjustments could either just be administrative, or they come to planning commission. So there'll be some minor adjustments being proposed for the subdivision ordinance. And then we've done a little bit of research from our other jurisdictions around here. Some of them still go all the way to council or their town council in certain cases. But the majority of folks or jurisdictions around here do not have something as simple as a boundary line adjustment, which is a ministerial item that if it meets the requirements, it should be approved. Those typically don't go all the way to council. And I do feel a little silly at times in front of council asking for approval of a boundary line adjustment. Almost never, it's rare if ever do they get turned down. If they meet the requirements, they should be okay. That's all I have for a zoning report.
Cool. Thank you. Need we say anything on item B? I think those are the things we said we were going to hold off to talk what our calendar going forward is going to be. And sorry, there's no sense talking with just four of us now. And right. Okay. All right. So I think there's nothing else under other business, right? Which would then lead us. Yeah.
What about just our calendar, maybe for next meeting? I
Okay,
know we're
yeah.
doing the public hearing on the ADUs. Is there any other business that will?
One other entrance corridor, signage on for one other entrance corridor item. So that'll be first, and then we can go into the ADU portion of it.
So for the next meeting in October, do you figure we'll talk about calendar then or work plans or?
I'm sort of been leaving that up to you because I think what we had to sort of agreed to, let's get through, not through, but at least through the majority portion of ADU and then go back to that discussion about what's next.
Okay.
So if you want that, we can certainly add or just keep it on here and then have that discussion at that time
Right.
because it just sort of rides along with, unless you want something more specific on the agenda.
No, that's fine. I didn't know if, so do you have a stack of, annual ordinance updates, corrections like you were just talking about that we need
Definitely
to,
have a red
start with.
file with a
Okay.
number of
so that would be something we
needed
want to do
zoning
soon.
text amendments. And then, of course, cottage housing is next on the list unless you all decide otherwise. And then those housekeeping measures that I just talked about in the red file that we call it, our text amendments. We have a number of those, yes.
Okay.
So if we leave it on, then if we might not have a lot of people coming for this hearing, and if we have a little bit of time, then we can get on it. Otherwise, we wait till the second meeting in October, right? I don't know if we're gonna have a full house for these, but we might, so we'll see.
Hard to tell. There was a nice article in the newspaper that was detailed and
yeah.
maybe we'll create some interest, but
Right.
we'll see.
All right, then that brings us along to number 7, city council report.
Oh, that was quick. We met last Thursday. We had a presentation by Davenport. They do a lot of our help us with our financial planning. And they talked about a sustainable capital funding strategy for the city. The city's in very good economic shape, but financial shape, but we do have some major projects coming up, including renovations to the high school and having to upgrade our water treatment plants, both our water and wastewater treatment plants. So some of the big recommendations that they gave to us was one, to get a credit rating so that we could get better rates on borrowing. So that's something we'll start to pursue. And then they said we should probably start looking for some funding on the equivalent of 2 cents on our property tax rate to start putting that away towards these big projects. So when budgeting comes around, that's something we'll discuss. It doesn't necessarily mean we'll raise our property tax by 2%, but we need to find the equivalent of that, which is about $120,000 a year to start putting away to fund these major capital projects. And the other item we discussed was the contract for the VDOT property. And we will vote to approve that or have a public hearing on that October 5th. And they're also asking this is Echelon who's looking to buy that property. They're also asking for some modifications to the Spotswood contract, mostly in terms of timing, so that they can execute these 2 projects at the same time if the contract's approved.
And so that would be a city council matter, not us, right?
Right, yeah, right.
Right.
And that's,
yeah.
yeah, that's all I have, unless there's questions.
Are we, for the renovations going on at the high school now for the VOTEC Center, are we already budgeted and paid up for our share of that?
Right, the county is taking out a loan, and so
Right.
we will pay have loan payments as well. We'll do debt service on that.
I see. Mhm. Okay. All right. So this is what a meeting is like when we're not doing a major revision of some large chunk, right?
John and Mary Stewart thought they were always 2+ hours.
So
Yes.
I almost feel like I want to stretch this out, and I will unless somebody makes a motion, because I could stay all night.
Well, I move to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thanks very much.
Thank y'all.
Adjourned.
It does feel very weird